But first, let's talk about why you are here, Mr. Bond. Hello and welcome to Wordplay Season 2, Episode 2. We are talking about exposition. I am Nika Harper, and my backstory is I'm an author, but I used to be a lot of things, but we're not getting into that because we're going to talk about exposition. So before we go any further, what is exposition? Exposition is the introduction and explanation of background information in any particular story. That sounds boring. Well, then you're not paying attention. With any story that we come up with, there's going to be a need for background information that is not necessarily given. It is so rare that you have all the information from the backstory that you need in order to kind of put the puzzles together yourself. Alright, let's be boring. Let's start talking in literary terms. Exposition is one of the 4 modes of discourse, or rhetorical modes of like story creation. I don't want to get this wrong, so I'm going to read off the list. The first one is argumentation, which is kind of persuasive writing. It's portraying or swaying an audience to a particular topic or idea. That's like advertising. Number 2 of the rhetorical modes is description, which is defining or creating something that the user or reader themselves can visualize. Consider this something more like poetry. Third on this list, narration. We're generally more familiar with this. This is the chronological telling of a certain story. It can be a series of events, and it can often use a lot of other rhetorical modes. It's storytelling. It's the novels that we read. Switching up the definition a little bit, 4 is actually exposition, which can be to explain, to inform or describe in a very kind of factual way, like you would find on the news. So those might be the rhetorical modes, but when it comes down to storytelling, these things become a little bit more foggy. Exposition in particular is used a lot as emphasis to kind of help the story move along, to help the reader catch up. Exposition is kind of optional. I mean, it depends on the kind of story that you want to tell. Is it more fun to keep someone completely in the dark? Or are you really trying to build a strong narrative and help people along the way, all the way through? If you're particularly skilled at story writing, sometimes you want to keep people in the dark. That's tricky, but it's fun. So literarily speaking, we have 2 forms of exposition. The first one is called the information dump. Yeah, it's just a lot like it sounds. That is often what they call the idiot lecture. It is the, I'll tell you why you are here, Mr. Bond, like that moment. It's a lot of information all at once, kind of this obstacle in the story where just every question gets answered, like, you know, point A, point B, you know, there's no subtlety to it. It is, here's the questions, here's the answers, and you're done now. This actually happens a lot in video games, whether it's forcing someone to make a decision, or whether it's just even the tutorial. As a game player, it's a thing that catches you up on things that you as a character should already know, how to walk, how to aim a gun. And as a reader, it catches you up on things that you might not have seen before, the backstory of certain characters, or why they're acting a certain way. The information dump is actually really effective in terms of serialized content. If you're on episode or book 2, it really helps to have like just a paragraph of, this is what happened in book 1. Maybe so you know. Character A did this. It was crazy. Anyway, book 2 happens now. So the second type of exposition is called incluing. It's a horrible word. This is a more metered flow of backstory, kind of like an IV drip. It sort of works organically, and the story itself braids the information that you need to know seamlessly in with the rest of the tale. So the division is how this information is administered into any of the stories that it is. Does it take up its own space? Does it dominate the story in a big way? Or does it sort of organically flow into it so you don't quite notice it being there? So whatever type you want to include in your story, that is entirely up to you, whether you want to do like the full-on villain speech, or even flashbacks, or reading up in history in the book. These things can actually happen. Personally, I'm a huge fan of incluing, and I did just that. Wordplay viewers, thank you so much for submitting an emotion, subject, or scenario for this particular episode. Some of the better ones are A City Druid and His Army of Pigeons, sent in by Marcelo. A Dark Place We Dare Not Tread, The Haggis Factory, sent in by Ix, or the Roman numeral 9, as far as I know. And then Shut Up Legs, by Gijs. G-I-J-S. What is that? The submissions that illuminated that creative spark in me were Fear of Rejection, sent in by Chris Hogan, A Conflict of Spiritual and Physical Self, sent in by Samuel Thomas, and Pride That Comes from Failure, sent in by Josh Hood. I made a story with a very mythological background that I called Echo, and here's a small part of it. My skills were stolen, and emptiness remains. I swallow the words given to me in sheer thirst of my own. I breathe them out with pain that they are not mine. I borrow from you and seek a poet, but your poetry is in your face. I read the rest of that in a specific reading video, and also you can read along with it on my Tumblr, which is nikaharper.tumblr.com. Alas, it is the time in Wordplay where you are challenged, so let's say something between 500 to 1,000 words with a deep backstory that you think of. Think of like your favorite D&D character and just go nuts with it. Specifically on the topics of a noticeable body marking, kind of like a scar or a burn or a birthmark, sent in by Tom. And the truth is, I could have stopped at any time, sent in by Casper. So please make something, whether you share it or not. If you like this episode, then check out the entire season 1 of Wordplay, like all 16 episodes of it. It's crazy. And of course, please support this on Patreon. It means so much to help writers write. You know what else is awesome? Subscribing to the channel and sharing this out to anyone who you think might want to write. Yeah, you should do that. So tell us what we need to know. And write on.